Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm S. Maxine Fisher, an author, fiber artist, and queer parent of one, bringing you a very special video today. So I am on my way to our second annual our second annual Fall Pride Market in historic Newcastle. I am super excited to come out into the community and be able to share all the plushies I've been making over the past 6 months. So let's get into it. I want to show you, first of all, everything that I've made for this market. I'm not going to be pulling out individual plushies because I am about to pack the car, but as soon as we get unpacked and at the market tomorrow, I will share some videos and some photos of everything, our spread, as we are placing it out. So without further ado, here we go. These are all the mini plushies I've made. I have 5 underbed bins full of anything from stress balls to leggy frogs, purses, dragons, and more dragons. And some of my bigger dragons are up here in this larger box that I use to accommodate the ones with the big long tails and the big snugglers that I didn't want to jam in with my smaller plushies. And down here in the kitchen, I have all my other plushies that I have made, including some of the more recent ones. I have Luna the Moth Dragon. She is up for adoption. And my mushroom guy. And right here is the last plushie I was able to squeeze in before market day. This is a happy capybara. I have had this guy on my bucket list forever, and I finally made him late last night while I was watching TV with my wife. He's so cute. I love the tangerine on his head. I feel like this is just a very zen little desk buddy, and he came out humongous. Hey everyone, it is the next day, so I'm here to talk about my experience at the market yesterday. I must confess, I was hoping to vlog a little bit more than I could. Hey everyone, it is the next day, so I'm here to talk about my experiences in yesterday's market. I was hoping to vlog a little bit more than I did. I was able to take some table pictures and some video of my stall setup, but that was about it because once we got selling, it was a very busy day. There were a lot of people around, and honestly, I didn't want to be that weird influencer that was too busy taking video to talk to the people around me. So that being said, I have lots of insights to share, and I hope that you will gain something from my experiences, good and bad, as we go along. So a little overview. This was a market that is set up by Delaware Gender and Sexuality Coalition. It's one of the larger pride organizations in my county that's up and coming. And their organizer, Jules, has been with us for several markets right now, supporting LGBTQ and small businesses. It is a great market to be at, both as a vendor and as a customer. It was a beautiful day. It was a really lovely experience, and everyone was so supportive, and there was a great sense of community. I always enjoy attending this event, and I will definitely be at the next one in June. The crowd that was there was mainly families, whether queer families, trans and non-binary folks, and their kids, people who had transgender and non-binary kids. So like when I say kids, I'm thinking like younger than preteen, you know, in the kind of the 8 to 12 range. There were a lot of those folks who were at my stalls as customers, as well as accompanying their grown-ups. Because, you know, as soon as you see a family with kids walk by a stall full of plushies, they have to come in. The fee was $50 per vendor, and you get a 10 by 10 outdoor booth. One of the good things about this market was that there are no duplicate vendors. They did keep the vendor count small, under 75 vendors, and our organizer was really good about making sure that you don't have duplicates of the exact same vendor. So there were other crocheters there who did apparel or bags, but there were no other crocheters who did plushies, which was my main shtick here. So that made me really happy. So I decided this time to go with a U-shaped setup. I think I did an L setup my first market in this location. And one of the things I found was that I just have way too much inventory for 2 tables. I've seen people do like a Z setup, but I didn't feel like it was going to work with me for this market because I wanted a lot of interaction, but I also didn't want my booth to be claustrophobic. So I did take the same spot as before where I was on a corner, and after the other 2 vendors had placed their canopies beside me, I determined I did have enough space to kind of spread out a little bit. So I placed my 2 side tables a little bit outside the canopy. That way there was a broad enough walking space that people didn't feel uncomfortable entering my booth and looking at everything. There was also space for people to walk around the sides of the booth and look at items on the opposite side of the far table, where I placed some of my larger items like my dragons, goldfish, etc. I brought some racks to add height to my display. And I also brought some baskets that I used to my advantage to be able to prop things up. One thing I really wish I had was some more shallow baskets to cluster and display items that would sort of hide inside the basket. So I didn't really pile things inside those tall baskets much. But honestly, I pushed myself to the last minute, went to Dollar Tree the night before and was like, oh shoot, they don't have anything shallow here. Oh well, I guess I've got what I've got. So next time I will really be trying to resource some more shallow display baskets for my items. I feel like it made things look less cluttered. The other thing that I didn't have was anything to add a lot of height to this display. Again, this was probably a result of poor planning on my part because I've seen people do something quite effective with a tablecloth and cardboard boxes, which I have. However, I also have a baby, so that's my excuse this time around. I did not get that fancy. I just put things out on the table, and it was what it was. Finally, we had really ideal weather. I did not need to bring tent walls or wrap things in plastic or otherwise protect from rain because we didn't have it. And we also didn't have any wind, and that made it so much easier to deal with inventory and tags not falling over because I had enough to deal with, you know, people rearranging items on the table as they went. Highlights of my market. One of the highlights was I did finally get my Square fully set up. I was able to track all my inventory in Square, and because I had a referral, I was able to take advantage of their free processing for the next 6 months. So that's taking me up until January, although I've almost used up the balance because I think they give you up to $1,000. That meant that I did not have to pay fees on any of my Square sales, and it made selling a lot simpler because I really kind of discouraged people from spending their cash or spending their, trying to scan a QR code for PayPal or Venmo when they could literally just tap to pay. And I found that most people who were savvy enough with the internet and their phone to scan a QR code also had Apple Pay or Android Pay or a credit card handy and were more than happy to use it. I really liked being able to do that because it helped streamline where I was using the same motions for every sale, and I didn't have to keep track of notifications to see whether a Venmo payment went through. I know that people sometimes tend to use Venmo as, that's free money that they have sitting there in their balance. So I do respect when people use that, but nobody asked this time around. I also didn't have many cash sales, and that made things a lot simpler. I did get a cash apron where I could kind of keep bills right physically on my person to make change instead of digging through my cash box. That being said, things got a little hairy during setup, and I did not put any cash in the cash apron, nor did I put the apron on my person, so I did have to dig through my cash box every time I made a cash sale. Additional highlights. I will say that Square did cause me some problems in which I actually lost sales. I am going to talk about that later in the video. I was really, really upset about it at the time. So I'm going to share what went wrong and what I could possibly do to prevent it in the future. Let me talk about some of the favorites in my market. So people made a lot of comments about my mushroom guy that I had, Russell, the pink Russula species of mushroom guy, and the mini mushroom guy that I made the other day as a test model for sewing the cap onto my one of my Etsy orders for mushroom guy. So I literally just freehanded this guy, and people really loved him. I got so many comments up until he sold, and he sold pretty quickly. So I think I feel encouraged. I think I'm going to try to make some more, and I think I will freehand him because he was pretty easy to do, and I felt like, I didn't buy a pattern. I didn't really like the patterns that were out there, so I just made my own. I didn't even frog back. It was a little irregular and lumpy and unique, like mushrooms tend to be. So maybe I'll make a couple more random freehand mushroom guys. We'll see. Other favorites included the dragon snugglers. People kept picking them up and saying how soft they were until they saw the prices, and then they put them back down because dragons are pretty detailed and time consuming. But I might make more just to maybe a simplified version for my next market to see if they sell, because they were pretty well liked. And finally, the cheeky turtles. Those are always a favorite. People want to pull the shell off and giggle when they see the little butt cheeks. And that was also one of my best sellers. So I almost sold out of my fruit-themed cheeky turtles. Let me get into my best sellers. Cheeky turtles. I almost sold out of my fruit-themed cheeky turtles, and people really liked those, as I mentioned before. The emotional support chickens. It was funny because people like chickens in general, and they kept picking them up, but I felt like seeing the tag that said emotional support chicken just kind of closed the sale for many of those, so I definitely need to restock. Axolotls. I made pride axolotls that had little rainbow whiskers, like each whisker was a different color, and those went really fast. I almost sold out of them. The spooky bats that I semi-designed, I kind of free-handed these little bats and put glow-in-the-dark eyes on them. A bunch of those sold. Stress balls of all kind. People really liked just grabbing something that was squishy and had the surprising little beads that extruded. So I sold a lot of those. The vitamin C turtles that are fruit themed, and the Diddy Dex snugglers. I only had 2 and both of them went, but people really liked the little mini dragon snugglers. Lowlights of the market. As I mentioned before, I lost not 1 but 3 sales due to issues with Square. So the first one, what happened was we're supposed to be set up by, I think, 11:30. It was around 10:45 to 11, and I was still putting products out when somebody came up to me and wanted to buy something. So as I was very, very distracted, I did go ahead and say, hey, if you see anything you want, go for it. Let me know if you need a price. And so they picked out 2 stress balls and handed them to me, and I fumbled with my phone to get out my Square, which I hadn't used in like 4 months, checked them out, and stuck my phone back in my pocket and kept working. About 5 minutes later, I pulled out my phone to text my wife, who had gone home to go grab some extra things that I'd left. And I saw what just absolutely gutted me. It said, sale canceled. So what had happened was that because I turned receipts on at my last market, it had been waiting for me to click OK and make a selection as to whether the person wanted a text receipt, an email receipt, or no receipt. I feel that this is actually a big design flaw with Square, that it does not have an option to, like a default option if the transaction times out. What it should do is that if you didn't select a receipt, then it should default to either no receipt or whatever settings the person has used previously. It's not a signature transaction, it is simply a preference. Secondly, after that, I guess it waits on your selection to actually process the credit card, because even though the transaction went through initially, it's still waiting on you to make a selection. Anyway, I digress. I was very upset about that. I did end up turning off the receipts feature again. I even went into my point of sale and turned off the option for, turned on the offline sales transaction. So just in case I lost connectivity during the festival, it would still go ahead and approve the sale if it was under $100. That being said, I went back to setting things up, putting prices out, taking some deep breaths, and just trying to get my head together before we got more foot traffic. However, it continued to be kind of busy because the vendors had brought their kids. Again, we had, young people coming into the stall and just browsing around. We had other vendors who were trying to hurry up and browse around and make purchases before the market actually opened. So it got busy fast and things were going pretty well. However, I had one woman come up and she bought a cheeky turtle from me, the one with the little apple shell. And I want to put a caveat that this was not the customer's fault and definitely not the organizer's fault. It's really an issue with Square, because after she walked away, I looked at my phone again, and again, I see the screen saying sale canceled. So at this point, I was just absolutely devastated. And to make matters worse, I was kind of stuck in my booth at that time, so I couldn't step out and look around and see if I could find this person who had just walked away with the product and flag her down and say, hey, your sale didn't go through. Can you come back and run it again? Because my wife was still on the road. She had gone home to go get some things and still hadn't come back yet. So that was really upsetting. So I was texting her saying, telling her this had happened and I'm stuck here and I can't find my customer and I can't find, figure out how to make the sale go through. And I have other people. So I literally had to, just put cancel payment and move on because I had to check other people out. I was, having people come through my booth. There was a lot of traffic at that point. So you can believe at this point, I was very careful looking at the screen, making sure I saw that little green approved check mark before I took my eyes off the person in front of me. That being said, it was a very busy day. And before I knew it, it was kind of the middle of the day when another person came through. They bought 2 axolotls. And after they walked away, I see that screen again. At this point, I was absolutely devastated. I had just lost 3 entire sales. They weren't large ticket items, they were, $20, $20, but still, that's a lot of money for, that is my profit for items that I have worked for hours and days on restocking and making these handmade items. So it's not just something that I bought off Temu and am reselling for profit. These are things that I have physically made myself and poured a lot of love into. So after those 2 axolotls, I was ready to cry. I told my wife, I need a hot chocolate and a hug. And she was so sweet. And she went and got me a hot chocolate and gave me a hug, not in that order. But I just kind of sat there just trying to decompress and be like, okay, I need to just accept this. It's happened. I'm moving on. I could not even remember who it was that bought those things, except that they were somewhat female presenting, as were most of the people making purchases in my stall. But I was like, okay, it's water under the bridge. It's water under the bridge. Fortunately, and this kind of helped turn my day around, a couple hours later, I had a woman come back into my stall, and she looked a little bit familiar, and then she was trying to make a purchase, and she said, I bought 2 axolotls from you. And I was like, oh, because I only had 5, and I only sold 2 to that one person. I said, you're the person who bought the 2 axolotls. Listen, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but your payment didn't go through. It timed out. And she said, I know, because I got the notification on my phone from my credit card and it said refunded. So that's why I came back to make sure, because it seemed like something went wrong. And I explained to her, yeah, thank you so much for coming back. So she actually grabbed another axolotl and paid for that, and just ran it as a separate transaction. So after that, I felt really relieved. And I think a lot of my feelings were not just the loss of the inventory, but just the fact that, I felt violated that Square had cheated me out of my money. And the fact that a customer came back and made it right really made me feel like all was okay with the world. That being said, thank you very much to that customer. If you are watching this video, that really made my day and I appreciate it. I think it was actually, the person might have actually been one of our food vendors, because my wife saw them later at behind one of the food trucks. And their family came back into my stall later on, and we were talking about what those items were. So I learned something interesting. I think most Gen Z kids and below can recognize an axolotl these days. They're very trendy. They're this little, I'm going to correct myself if I'm wrong. They're this little amphibian, or little kind of salamander-like creature that has these little whiskers. They are native to Mexico, and we are saying it wrong. So the actual name is pronounced ajolote. And we have kind of adopted that word and pronounced it in our American way. So I'm not going to go forward calling these ajolote to most of my customers, because they would just look at me cross-eyed, but that is the correct pronunciation. So thank you for that tidbit. That was really interesting to learn. It was a little bit busy with just kind of cleaning up after all my younger customers, but they did also come in and want to buy some of the stress balls that they'd played with. So I'm glad that I was able to make people happy. There were also some pets that were supervised, but having a difficult day, because some people brought their very large Labradoodles through there, and there were multiple dogs who did not want to have multiple dogs in the area. So as you can imagine, they were getting somewhat agitated. A couple of those people brought them into my booth or very near my booth. So that was a little bit nerve-wracking, because if your pet licks a $200 plushie, like somebody tried to do the last time, then that inventory is no longer fit to sell. And that's a big deal for small business owners. But fortunately, we did not have any loss or damage due to pets. So that was a good thing. Otherwise, it was a beautiful day. The weather was ideal, and I definitely will be going back to this market, as well as I would like to do more craft fairs in the future around this time of year. It was so much less work when you're not breaking a sweat every time you lift a box. I've done some in the summer where it was just blazing hot, and November and October were just this has been the perfect time to be doing the heavy lifting that is involved in setting up and tearing down for a craft fair. Having my wife there was a huge help, because she was just on top of all the inventory and, helping to reset everything after customers left, and just making things look pretty and less cluttered. So that was really a big help. All right, let me go get my sales report, and I'm going to review how much I made and what I sold. All right, I'm going to go old school with pen and paper here, because I printed out a report from Square so I can see everything that sold at my market. All right, here's what I got. We sold 4 axolotls at $15 each. We sold 2 pride flag bees. I sold a rainbow bee and a non-binary bee for $15 each. 4 cheeky turtles for $18 each, 7 emotional support chickens for $15 each. You can see a pattern here. Kind of 15 is that sweet spot where I sell most of my minis. 1 pride flag chill pill for 10, and 1 custom order for 15. That was somebody who saw the large capybara that I had made and wanted it, but wanted it in a smaller version. So I did promise them a mini capybara, and so that's going to be an order for local pickup. Thank you very much. 1 Tank the Dragon for $25, and that was one of my little baby dragons. 1 emotional support pickle and 1 protest frog that with the little resist sign for $10 each. And don't mind, you're going to hear my son downstairs. He's playing with Grandma. 2 small fish. Those were both the Betty the Betta fish by Crochet by Jenna. And those sold for $25 each. I sold 1 transgender cat ear beanie hat for $35. 1 rainbow heart keychain for $10. 1 rainbow mug cozy for $8. Oh, he hears mommy. He hears mommy's voice. He's going, meh, meh. I sold my mini mushroom guy for $55. That was the one that I free-handed as a test. I sold 2 mushy boys, the little mini mushroom guys, for $12 each. I had 2 baby octopi for 2 baby octopi for $10 each. I got to go down and play with this kid soon because he's crying for mommy. 1 sushi snail, that was $18. 2 mini dragon snugglers for $35 each is what I charged for those Diddy Deck snugglers. 3 spooky buds, that was 2 bats and 1 ghost. That were my my Halloween makes. And 1 of my squids, the rainbow squid, sold as a baby toy for $35. I do make these squids that are baby safe because they have the sewn on crochet eyes instead of the safety eyes. And they're a perfect gift for a newborn because they're so snuggly and they like to play with them. I sold a total of 7 stress balls for $15 each. That was 1 bubbling cauldron, 2 frogs, 3 octopi, and 1 popper fish. That's not including the 2 popper fish that unfortunately were a loss as opposed to a sale. I sold 1 hatchling Toby from the Matilda Sea Turtle pattern, so that was 10, and 3 vitamin C turtles, which are my fruit-themed mini turtles for $25 each. And I sold 1, it says custom amount. I think that was a mushy boy for $15. So I put down that I sold 2, but I actually sold 3. That means I need to adjust my inventory. And that is it for, nope, that is my entire sales report. Okay, so in total, I made, where's my total? Dang it. In total, I made $907 yesterday. That was $818 square payments, and the remainder was cash. So I did make a couple cash sales, but it was mainly square processing. I would have been charged $25.91 in square fees. However, because I did get a referral for free processing, I did not have to pay those fees, and I was able to keep all of my earnings. I had losses that totaled $48 due to those canceled transactions. That's not counting the person who did return and pay for their items. So my impressions overall from the market yesterday were, it was a very good day. I feel like the total was definitely worth the effort of setting up and attending the market. It was a full day, it was a busy day, and we had a really good turnout. It was also really nice to be able to come out and see the community. I actually had a neighbor who came out with her kids and hung out there for a little bit in my booth and was able to come buy their kids some Christmas gifts. So that was nice. It was good to see them. A couple of takeaways from the market. I will definitely be contacting Square about the issue with the point of sale to see if there's a setting that can prevent that from happening again. Hey everyone, I did contact Square, and so here is my update on that situation. When I spoke with a customer service rep, I did go in and I went into my transaction history and was able to see the two canceled transactions, not counting the one that had timed out earlier at the market where it was never authorized. Unfortunately, they were not able to refund the $18. What they said is that probably what happened is that the app had quote unquote gotten interrupted during the transaction. That could occur if you turn off your phone screen or flick away, or if you receive a call or text message in the middle of that transaction being authorized. It won't run in the background and the transaction will be canceled, and there's no way to go back in and continue it without the person returning to your booth and reswiping their card. So that was unfortunate. They did tell me that in the future, if I did have receipts turned on and I collected an email address or a telephone number, which would put that information into the Square system, then they on their end would have a way to contact that customer and try to get the transaction to go through. I'm not really sure how it works on their end, but basically, without a receipt, you are out that money, and unfortunately, they could not do anything about it. I do understand how that happened now and how I can prevent it from happening in the future, but I was left feeling that that is a huge design flaw with the iPhone app used as a point of sale, and I hope that that is something that Square is able to correct in the future. Most apps have a feature whereby you can run the programming in the background, even if something interrupts that app's functioning, like a phone call or text message. But that being said, I am not an app developer or a programmer, so I don't pretend to really know how that works beyond that. That was something that I expected to function, and it did not. I might even need to bring a separate phone and just plug it into a power pack and keep the screen on permanently. If it turns out that shutting the screen off to save power might have caused those canceled transactions. As far as sales and items, so bestsellers included cheeky turtles, chickens, spooky bats, axolotls, ajolote, stress balls, vitamin C turtles, and the Diddy Dex snugglers. For my next market, I'm definitely going to restock chickens, cheeky turtles, the mushy boys, and keychains and snugglers. I think all those will be good makes for the upcoming holidays. As much as I love making larger, more detailed plushies, I think I need to find some different venues in which to sell those, because I didn't sell any of my larger dragons, mushroom guy, or any of kind of the showstopper pieces. And I actually do have a lot now because I've done some bigger projects over the summer. I also want to do some more markets next year, and I'm really hoping that I will be able to do Delaware Pride in the upcoming year if I have some extra time. So we will stay tuned for that. I hope that you were able to take something away from this market video and just be able to learn some things that can help you in your markets. If you have any tips and tricks, please feel free to drop a comment down below and let me know what has been working for you, and if you have any advice for me going forward. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Don't forget to smash that like and subscribe button, and please be kind in the comments to me, to others, and ultimately to yourself. Have a fabulous day, everyone, and stay creative. Bye!